You're listening to the Armenian Radio of New Jersey on 89.5 FM. Each and every Sunday we come to you and we explore the Armenian world. We share with you the news of Armenia and the diaspora, and especially our communities. And we have so much in our community, so much happens in the New York area, and we should be very, very proud of the titans we have in the area. We do our best to inform you of the developments through our guests, and we feel very, very honored to have with us Mr. Zaven Khanjian, who is the executive director, a very well-known individual in the community. We've heard him in Times Square, we have read his books, we admire him. And today we'll begin with the organization he serves, the AMAA, the Armenian Missionary Association of America. And each and every email I get from Zaven's office is really brightens my day, and I feel the organization, I feel the work, I feel the important work, and high above the list is education. And my first question is, in the very latest bulletin you sent had to do with some money that needs to be raised for the students in Lebanon, Anjar and Burj Hamud and other institutions. Welcome, and it's all yours. Tell us about the works of AMAA.
Thank you, Vartan. Thank you. You are a friend too, and you have built a legacy in this community that you've served this community beyond imagination, and history will definitely tell that. The AMAA is at its centennial year, and we've been celebrating for almost a year now. We've toured half the globe and continue on doing so. Two very major celebrations are still to come. The one in September is in Armenia, in the homeland. A week of festivities. We'll have 6 events in 8 days, a very busy schedule and plan. And then in October, we wrap this up at the annual meeting in California with an celebratory annual banquet on October 20th. But as we celebrate the centennial of the AMAA and pay tribute to all those who over a century have given everything, a lot, their imagination, their vision, their sweat, hard work, certainly monetary input, have made the AMAA what it is today. We still think about the future. Our most important goal is the future. How to prepare for the future, what to do in the future, goals to set for the future. So we're not blinded by this celebratory centennial celebrations, but it is a platform from where we jump into the future, into the second century, and draw our path. And that second century definitely includes what you mentioned a minute ago, the Middle East, the Near East, where we've experiencing in the past 7-8 years events that we've not seen similar over the past century since the genocide. Very briefly, our communities in the Near East have been devastated by what went on first in Lebanon in the 70s and 80s, and then in this past 5 to 7 years in Syria itself. Syria being the cradle of the diaspora. It's the mother Armenian diaspora community. It has nourished, it has been the avish of all diaspora. Is not what it was yesterday. It's not what it was 10 years ago or the past 50, 100 years ago, and it will not be the same again. The whole Middle East is changing character, changing its existence, its status, and I doubt very much that we will see the same diaspora, vibrant, the heart of the diaspora that it was in the past century. And so we have to be concerned of what's left there. And already this is an ailment that we see in all our diasporas, various denominations or segments, institutions. It's serious. We are losing population. Our schools have been depopulated. Schools are being closed. Schools are being certainly consolidated, and certainly that's the right thing to do. So it is a very major subject for us to be concerned with. We have a lot of difficulties there, and that's cosmopolitan again. And as far as we are concerned, in Lebanon, for example, we have 4 high schools and 1 secondary school, intermediate school, and we are thinking how to approach mitigation, how to approach a solution where all of them, the student body, can survive in the next decade or 2 or 3. Of course, we have to think about the churches as well, our other cultural institutions. All of them have the nature of crisis and trouble in them. The short description of the solution is an arrow, a direction towards the homeland. Of the whole entities that are in the Middle East, when the subject comes as to how we can look for solutions to this crisis, I say there is one main solution, and that's as much as possible and in a gradually planned objective or direction is gradually move to Armenia. We're seeing it. It has happened. It is happening. It happened, unfortunately, haphazardly as far as the Syrian crisis is concerned. We never came together, sought a solution, and decided what to do. It happened because the homeland, Hyrenik, was the only place that they could go without a passport, without a visa, especially, and that's where they headed. But many of them used it as a platform to go elsewhere. We have to make sure that we conserve them there, that we settle them there, and we make sure that our communities, which are at risk in the new in the Middle East, we direct them to the homeland.
You know, very, very interesting, because that is exactly what I heard the Minister of Diaspora commenting the other day, is they would like to see a population growth as they experienced in Armenia from 1960 to 1990. They hope if that pattern, that accelerated population growth in Armenia will be in parallel to those years, they hope to have 5 million Armenians in the homeland in the year 2050, and that is definitely in line with what the Armenian government wants. And last week we also heard that there are people, if they had a choice in the good old days, it would be always to move towards the West. Now the younger generation is considering Armenia as an alternative to move and produce and contribute to. There are many, many stories we hear about successful people moving from our communities there. But I'd like to go back to the importance you give to the future. And obviously when we speak about the future, one thing comes to mind is the youth, the educated Armenian youth. And what I was very impressed by your last memo or email was that you're trying to raise $1 million for the schools in Burj Hamid or Anjar and other places in Lebanon, plus you have matching funds. How do you work this magic of raising funds? Because you're very well known for what you've done for the Syrian refugees and your ambitious $20 million goal for the centennial.
Yes, the AMAA has been supporting education in the Middle East for 100 years. This is something definitely not new. After the genocide, as the survivors moved to the Near East, to the Syrian desert, orphans, widows, they started establishing themselves. Of course, the first thing they did is they built a church and then a school and so on. And the AMAA the Armenian evangelical community had a vast wealth of educational institutions in the Ottoman Empire. Having lost all that, and the AMAA coming to existence in 1918, right after the genocide, once these immigrants are, the generation of my father, your father, settled in the Middle East, the AMAA assisted them and helped them to establish educational institutions. And so supporting education institutions is not new, has been ongoing for a century. What happened lately, as I described, the difficulties and the crisis that is in existence in the Near East because of the depopulation of our communities over there, has created a problem in our schools. And when we were drawing the map of our capital campaign on the occasion of the centennial, we put a lot of emphasis on sustaining the existing education institutions in Lebanon and Syria so that they can serve the population who is there, which unfortunately consists of the middle class and below, because the affluent have already been unfortunately sending their children to other non-Armenian private schools. So we had a very anonymous lady in New York, from New York, who came up with the idea of donating $1 million to the educational institutions in Lebanon. And she made it a matching gift. All I had to do is to convince her to, rather than address or assign or designate this gift to a single institution in Lebanon, to designate it to all Armenian evangelical educational institutions. It didn't take much effort to convince. They already had an idea, a conviction of the need. And so a matching fund of $1 million was established. And I'm glad to say, and I'm sure they are extremely happy to see, that the matching fund is growing at the rate or even faster than the gift of these wonderful, gracious benefactors and donors. So we will soon get there and create this $2 million educational fund. It's called the Helen and Popken Megerdichan Armenian Evangelical Educational Fund that will assist our institutions in the Near East.
You know, obviously you do a lot of work in Armenia and Artsakh and 24 other countries. You are the leader of these institutions. Armenia has changed over the past 2-3 months since the Velvet Revolution. And I just wanted to know, how has it changed with regards to AMA? How have you been affected? And what do you see the future as we move forward?
I think the way I can describe as how we have been affected by only being part of the population in Armenia. The AMA as such, its plans, its assistance, its involvement in Armenia and Artsakh has not changed, will not change, cannot change, except for the better. Being more energized to do more, to do better, and that is something that comes naturally because of the needs that have been grown there, because of the influx of Armenians from the neighboring countries, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. But a lot has changed within the population in Armenia, and of course our community, our denomination, our churches, our schools, the society and the community that is around our institutions certainly has changed, being part of the whole. And here is how it has changed. I was in Armenia on May 18th. That was 10 days after the Prime Minister was voted as Prime Minister in Armenia. And you cannot but see the change in mood in Armenia if you're there. I think the thermostat in Armenia of judging as to what the mood is are the taxi drivers. And so if you just sit down in a taxi, and start a dialogue with a taxi driver, you will immediately feel that mood, which we also had felt for a long time prior to the Velvet Revolution. And I'll say, I vouch personally, that I have witnessed 180 degrees turnaround in the mood of the population. And certainly this is a great change. Now, the impact of this is manifold, of course. First of all, the population does not think of leaving Armenia anymore. We are not, hopefully we have stopped that hemorrhage in Armenia. That's very important, extremely important, having lost 1/3 of the population since independence. I think that is a tremendous positive effect of the Velvet Revolution. Number two, we are at the threshold of a reverse now of a reverse tide, let's say, a move against the tide, having not only diaspora Armenians moving to Armenia, but of course many Armenians who had left Armenia in the past 30 years have been seriously thinking and taking that positive step of moving back to Armenia. I'm sure all of us who are listening now know of one or two or three, and this is universal in all over the diaspora. So that's the number two benefit. Number three benefit, of course, I always believe that after independence, the first thing that we did, of course, is to create the elements of a sovereign state. Certainly, there was work with that, and that was very difficult work in the establishment of a sovereign state, and also all the infrastructure that goes with it. But apart from that, we were stagnant. We remained stagnant in general until the Velvet Revolution. Our intellectuals, our scientific minds, most of them left Armenia, and so we witnessed that stagnation. It doesn't matter if we have a few beautiful buildings in Yerevan, but the human mind and human intellect left Armenia. Together with freezing the creative mind of the Armenian population, who even was left there, because the situation that they were in, the psychological, political pressure that they were under, certainly did not permit them to be that creative Armenian mind. And so I think we're living in a renaissance right now. Զարթոնքի մեջ ենք, եւ այդ զարթոնքին արդյունքը այն պիտի լա, որ այս ժողովուրդը պիտի սկսի գրգին ստեղծագործել կորձնեության իմաստով, բիզնեսի իմաստով, ստեղծագործել հալավելի խանդավառությամբ մշակույթի իմաստով, եւ դակավին մեր ամբողջ այդ դգարացումը թուլությունը փոխել թեպի նոր զարթոնք, թեպի նոր զարգացում, թեպի նոր վերելք.
You're listening to the Armenian Radio of New Jersey on 89.5 FM. Our guest is Mr. Zaven Khanjian. We will be continuing this discussion with a little bit more in Armenian after the segment coming up with Seta Jebejan. We ask you to remain with us, and soon after Seta Jebejan's segment, we'll continue asking Mr. Khanjian about the visit of the Minister of Diaspora in LA, in New York, and Boston areas between July 27th to August the 6th, thereabouts. That should be very interesting, so Armen, it's yours.